Coming up on this Monday edition of Newsline at noon, President Park Geun-hye returns home from her trip to Asia and Australia after agreeing with world leaders to boost economic growth and give Korean exports tariff-free access to more countries. U.S. President Barack Obama condemns the beheading of the third American hostage by Islamic State militants, calling it an act of pure evil. Plus, foreign investors will have greater access to Chinese shares as a trading link goes live today to let investors in the Shanghai and Hong Kong bourses trade shares listed on each other's markets. These stories and more on Newsline at noon. It's new Monday, November 17th here in Korea. Thanks for tuning in. Live from Seoul, I'm Eoh Jin-joo.
It's very good to have you with us. I'm Mark Broome. Our top story this afternoon. President Park Geun-hye is back on Korean soil after returning from a 9-day trip that took her to China, Myanmar and Australia.
Along the way, she attended 3 global forums, held 6 bilateral summits, and announced the conclusion of free trade negotiations with 2 countries. Our presidential office correspondent Choi Sun has more on the president's achievements.
Following a 2.5-year tug-of-war, President Park Geun-hye meeting her Chinese counterpart on the sidelines of the APEC Beijing summit announced the conclusion of Korea-China FTA negotiations.
글로벌 경기 회복이 지연되고 저성장 국면이 지속되고 있는 세계 경제에도 반가운 소식이 될 것이라고 생각합니다.
By finalizing a free trade deal with its biggest trading partner, Korea hopes to reduce $5.4 billion in annual tariffs and to accelerate entry into China's consumer goods and domestic markets. Another long-awaited deal, Korea's FTA with New Zealand, was finalized and announced by the 2 countries' leaders on the sidelines of the G20 Brisbane summit. Korea has secured a greater voice in multilateral trade talks, having concluded FTAs with 10 out of the 12 countries participating in the U.S.-led free trade network, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and 16 of 21 Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation members. On the diplomatic front, President Park maintained a balance in relations with Korea's key partnering nations, talking about ways to boost cooperation on the North Korean nuclear issue with both of the G2 leaders. She also sought ways to thaw relations with Tokyo, agreeing with her Japanese counterpart to move forward on talks over resolving Japan's wartime sex slavery of Korean women and expressing hopes for a trilateral leaders summit with China and Japan.
영내의 평화와 번영에 기여하는 길은 바로 이와 같은 실질적 협력을 강화하는 것이라고 생각합니다.
And lastly, at the G20 summit, the Korean leaders' growth strategy by way of social reforms, deregulation, and support for the creative industries received the highest grade among the G20 nations. Choi Sun, Arirang News.
The top intelligence official in the U.S. has opened up about his recent trip to North Korea to free 2 American detainees. James Clapper achieved Washington's goal of bringing the 2 men home, but says the North Korean officials he spoke to in Pyongyang weren't exactly happy to see him. Kwon So-ah has the details.
U.S. Director of National Intelligence James Clapper can cross visiting North Korea off his bucket list. But the trip was apparently not as satisfying on North Korea's end. Clapper told CBS News in an interview over the weekend that North Korea seemed to be disappointed with the trip as there was no diplomatic breakthrough as a result. Clapper says the short letter he carried with him from President Barack Obama mostly stated that it would be received as a positive gesture to free American detainees Kenneth Bae and Matthew Miller. Clapper said the tone of the dinner he had with officials was pretty terse and that this atmosphere kept him apprehensive on whether he would be allowed to bring the captives back to the States. During talks on human rights, officials told him they don't want Washington kicking up a fuss about the issue. Clapper said officials in Pyongyang criticized the U.S. for attempting to intervene in their internal matters. He added that he got the impression the North felt it was under siege. The intelligence chief, however, also encountered a different tone on the sidelines when an official who appeared to be in his 40s expressed interest in Clapper visiting again in the future. Clapper said this seemed to embody the generational divide between the younger and older officials in the North Korean regime. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
Now, North Korea's top Workers' Party official Choi Ryong-hae embarks on a week-long trip to Russia this Monday as a special envoy for leader Kim Jong-un. Choi is expected to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow around Tuesday, where they will likely discuss ways to strengthen the two countries' ties and economic cooperation. The senior North Korean official is expected to deliver a letter from Kim Jong-un, and attention is being drawn to whether Choi's trip could be a precursor to the North Korean leader visiting Russia for a bilateral summit with Putin. Choi's visit comes amid the two countries' deepening diplomatic isolation, with Pyongyang's deteriorating relationship with its traditional ally China, and Russia being sanctioned for its role in the Ukraine crisis. Now, once rosy relations between North Korea and China have soured since Kim Jong-un assumed power in the north a few years ago, and in a clear indication of the frayed ties, a multi-million-dollar bridge that was supposed to boost trade between the two countries stands unused well after its scheduled opening date. Park Ji-won tells us more.
This is the new Yalu River Bridge, linking the northeastern Chinese city of Tandong to North Korea's border city of Sinŭiju. The 3-kilometer-long structure was scheduled to open late last month, but Chinese state media reports the opening has been pushed back indefinitely. China footed the entire cost of the $350 million project, expecting the bridge to boost bilateral trade. But after 4 years of work, facilities and roads linking the bridge into the border cities remain unfinished. Satellite images taken in September also show that North Korea hasn't started building customs facilities. Compared to pictures taken in October of last year, we see no improvements at all. In fact, some buildings have been torn down during the time.
China and North Korea delayed laying roads linking the bridge to the cities because Beijing is not happy with Pyongyang's nuclear programs, and North Korea is unhappy with its current relationship with Beijing. I don't think the bridge will open until the latter half of next year.
Watchers say the hold-up completing the bridge, which was supposed to handle some 80% of goods passing between both countries, reflects the sour relations between the once strong allies. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
The United States says U.S. forces Japan will be automatically deployed to the Korean Peninsula in the event of a contingency without prior consultation with Tokyo. Citing a statement released by the U.S. State Department, Seoul-based Yonhap news agency reported on Monday that Washington is prepared to carry out all obligations under its bilateral security treaty and joint operational plans with South Korea. The statement contradicts Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's remark at a parliamentary session in July, where he said U.S. forces Japan must seek Tokyo's understanding before sending Marines to the Korean Peninsula in the event of a contingency. Now, today is a huge day in the world of finance because the Shanghai Hong Kong Stock Connect program launches on this Monday. The program will allow investors in each centre direct access to the other stock market in one of the most significant openings of China's capital account in a decade. However, local analysts are concerned it's going to have a negative impact on the Korean market. Our Son Jung-in has this report.
China's Shanghai stock market is opening to foreign investors for the first time since it was launched 24 years ago. It's not a full opening, but the new trading link between the Shanghai and Hong Kong bourses will allow international investors eyeing Chinese stocks greater access to the market. From Monday, they will be able to buy and sell over 550 of the largest A-grade shares listed in Shanghai directly via the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. Until now, only institutional investors with a secured quota from the Chinese government could invest directly in China's domestic markets. But the new scheme is going to make foreign investment in the mainland a lot easier. And the overseas investors are already flocking in.
Around 150,000 people opened investment accounts in just one day. We expect more security agencies to open accounts for their clients over the next few days.
China's finance ministry announced that foreign investors will enjoy personal income tax exemptions on profits from investments through the Connect program for the next 3 years. Korean analysts say the move will negatively impact the domestic stock market, and they've expressed concerns about possible capital outflows to China. 손정인, Arirang News.
Now let's get a check on some of the other global headlines we're following at this hour on Monday here in Seoul. For that, we turn to Eunice Kim, standing by at the news center.
Eunice, unfortunately, we have to begin with news of yet another horrific video released by the Islamic State group. It showed the aftermath of American hostage Peter Kassig's execution, with U.S. President Barack Obama condemning it as an act of pure evil.
Yeah, Jin-joo, difficult times for those who loved Peter Kassig, as Washington several hours ago did confirm the decapitated head seen in that video did in fact belong to the 26-year-old aid worker. We won't show it, but you may remember him from a previous execution video that had warned of his coming demise. President Obama honored the Muslim convert, who also went by the name Abdul Rahman Kassig, as a humanitarian who worked to save the lives of Syrians injured and dispossessed by the Syrian conflict, unlike IS, whom he said was bent only on sowing death and destruction. Kassig was a former U.S. soldier who returned to the region to help refugees through his aid group, Sarah, but was captured by militants in Syria last October. The latest video suggested a rush project by a group on the run, the 15-minute clip, which also showed the mass beheadings of 18 Syrian troops, capitalized on brutality where it lacked on production quality. Pro-democracy protesters in Hong Kong have been given an eviction notice, paving the way for a police crackdown should it not be observed. Several local newspapers published the court order on Saturday, ordering protesters to leave the Citic Tower area, which borders the main protest site. As local media report, thousands of police officers are on standby. Sunday marked 50 days since demonstrations paralyzed some of the financial hub's major roadways as demonstrators call for free elections in the territory's chief executive polls in 2017. China has allowed for a vote of candidates vetted by a committee loyal to Beijing. Plans to relocate a busy U.S. Marine Air Base in Okinawa could face some stiff resistance, as residents there have elected a governor demanding the base be moved off the island altogether. Takeshi Onaga took the win in Sunday's polls over two-term incumbent Horikazu Nakaima, backed by Tokyo. The result is being viewed as a blow to Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, who is expected to call snap general elections soon. Meanwhile, Japan's economy unexpectedly dipped into a technical recession in the third quarter, with newly released figures showing the country's gross domestic product had contracted at an annualized 1.6%, flipping over a widely forecast gain of 2.1%. The worse-than-expected performance will likely delay a sales tax hike already partially applied to curb the national debt.
Stay up to date on the latest news out of Korea, connecting to our team of reporters about the issues that matter to Korea. On air, on your mobile, online. Find out more about Korea on Newsline at noon with Mark Broome and Eoh Jin-joo.
I'm Eoh Jin-joo.
Market researcher, strategy analytics, said Thursday that LG Electronics brought in about 11.
The National Assembly has begun assessing next year's government budget with hopes of passing it by the legal deadline of December 2nd. Ruling Senate party lawmakers are focused on allocating the $340 billion budget to revive the economy and improving people's livelihoods. The main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy is trying to steer talks more toward welfare issues and hopes to trim about $4.5 billion in spending in the name of fiscal health. Aside from reviewing next year's budget, the two rival parties are also trying to settle their differences on a set of economic and livelihood bills so they too can be passed by December 2nd. And the proportion of Korea's exports to Japan has dropped to a record low this year in nearly half a century, with most of the blame being laid at the feet of the depreciating Japanese yen. Our Hwang Jie has the details.
The tumbling Japanese yen is weighing on Korean exporters trying to sell their products to the country. Data from Statistics Korea shows exports to Japan in the January to September period this year stood at roughly $24.5 billion, accounting for 5.7% of all Korean exports. That ratio is the lowest recorded since the agency started to compile such data in 1966. During the same period, exports to China took up around 25%, while the United States made up 12%. Korean exports to Japan has been on a downward spiral for the past 3 years. Watchers attribute the drop to Korea's move to diversify its export markets and to the falling yen, which was triggered by the Japanese government's aggressive stimulus measures. The yen has lost a third of its value against the greenback since the end of 2012. The weekend trend strengthens the price competitiveness of Japanese exporters and normally raises Korea's imports from Japan, but that has not happened yet. Experts say that's because of the Japanese exporters that are not actively cutting down their prices on the back of the weekend, and Korea's sluggish domestic demand that is slowing Korea's overall imports. Hwang Jie, Arirang News.
Now, Koreans in the lower income bracket are spending a majority of their earnings on debt. Data by Statistics Korea shows that indebted Koreans in the lower 20% of the income bracket use nearly 70% of their disposable income paying off debt. In other words, for every $1,000 in income, around $700 goes towards debt payments. The average total of household debt in Korea has risen more than 2% over the last year, raising fresh concerns it will further worsen the country's snowballing household debt problem. The number of those filing for bankruptcy also increased by nearly 9% during the January to September period on year to more than 100,000. Now, this next story won't come as too much of a surprise if you've ever been to Korea before. A new poll has found that almost every Korean adult owns a smartphone. US-based travel agency Expedia says 94% of Koreans it surveyed possess a smartphone, to top the list of 25 countries surveyed. Korea was followed by Mexico, Hong Kong, Singapore and Thailand. Japan actually recorded the lowest rate among the countries surveyed at just over 50%, while Koreans had the highest rate to own other gadgets such as laptops along with their smartphones. The survey found the companies they work for don't provide them with the gadgets. They generally have to pay for the devices out of their own back pockets. In fact, less than a fifth of Koreans surveyed said their company had supplied them with their smartphone.
Smart home is one of the most promising areas in the Internet of Things in which everything we touch and interact with is connected to the World Wide Web.
Yes, and in fact, first, companies were quick to hook up home appliances such as TVs and vacuum cleaners, refrigerators to the net, but now they're exploring products that are not traditionally electronic. Things, in fact, including furniture. Our Kim Ji-yeon has this week's Industry Insight.
Korea's largest telecommunications operator, SK Telecom, has partnered up with the country's #2 furniture maker, Hyundai Levart, to produce smart furniture. The devices will allow users to enjoy multimedia content from applications downloaded on a wireless network and will be available on both the iOS and Android operating systems. SK Telecom says it's the first company in the world to create smart furniture, and the development is in line with its goal of providing better smart home services amid the Internet of Things, where objects are being increasingly connected to the web.
We thought that connecting the furniture most commonly used by homemakers would be a great way to expand the market of the Internet of Things, because they're mainly going to be the ones using smart home services.
For example, users of this kitchen shelf can check produce prices or look up a recipe while listening to the radio. The shelf is also compatible with existing smart home devices that open or lock the front door and control room temperature. But these devices are not just for users who spend most of their time at home.
This is one of my personal favorites, the dressing table. It's very convenient for workers like me who have to get up and rush to the office every morning. I can quickly check the latest news and my schedule while I do my hair and makeup. And there's sensors embedded in the mirrors, which are touchscreen. So it's also Bluetooth enabled, so I can receive and make calls or listen to my music using my smartphone.
The development of other kinds of furniture, including smart beds and sofas, is also underway. Smart furniture will be available for commercial use by the end of this year and will be released to the public next year. SK Telecom and Hyundai Levart say they hope to raise $45 million in sales of smart furniture by the year 2017. And the climate for their business looks bright due to the rising demand for smart home devices. Back in January, the CEO of U.S. tech giant Cisco Systems, John Chambers, said he saw the Internet of Things as a $19 trillion opportunity. The U.S.-based Consumer Electronics Association predicts sales of smart home devices will increase to nearly 36 million gadgets in 2017 from the current 3 million. Kim Jeon, Arirang News.
Now, Korea is taking inspiration from Napa Valley in the US and Food Valley in the Netherlands in a bid to turn itself into a gateway for global food exports in Northeast Asia.
Right, the $500 million project is expected to provide a new source of economic growth and job creation. Kim Min-ji reports.
Korea has set its sights on the food industry as a new growth engine for the economy and is seeking to develop itself into a hub for the Northeast Asian food market. The Korea National Food Cluster, or Food Palace as it's called, is part of the Korean government's plan to build a food industrial complex that will facilitate business and research activities and become a convenient gateway for global exports. Located in Iksan, Jeollabuk-do province, the site is near major air and seaports and can be easily accessed by the capital via bullet train. And with its proximity to major markets like China and Japan, the government expects the $500 million project to have a substantial economic impact.
The Korea National Food Cluster is expected to generate over $13 billion in sales, facilitate $3 billion in exports, and create 22,000 new jobs a year when it reaches full operation in 2020.
The government has so far signed agreements with over 100 local and foreign companies and plans to lure more businesses and investors with incentives such as tax exemptions and state subsidies. While the European food market has been on the decline, the Northeast Asian market, with a population of 1.5 billion, is expected to emerge as a new major food market, accounting for over 30% of the global industry. The government says that with the initiative, it will create an environment for potential investors to use food policy as a springboard for international expansion. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Good afternoon. Unlike the dark and foggy morning we had, it's getting brighter outside and it will get even sunnier as the day goes on. But temperatures will not fully respond. Daytime highs are expected to be slightly cooler than yesterday. barely rising to teens in many regions, and wind chill will make it feel even colder. So let's take a closer look at the readings for today. Now, the daytime high in the capital will rise to 10, while Daegu tops out at 14, and Gwangju and Busan will climb up to 13 and 16 under lots of sunshine. Now, for other regions, Jeju Island and Daejeon will be getting up to 14 and 12 later on, and Dokdo will see a high of 10. Now, the temperatures will drop to -1 here in the capital tomorrow morning, knowing that the about 2 is the average for this time of the year. So we'll wake up to cold morning tomorrow. But as we can see, there shouldn't be any dramatic changes in weather this week. That's all from me today. Back to you, Mark and Jin-joo in the studio.
Thank you very much, as always, Jian, for the weather. And those are the stories we're following at this hour.
Mark and I will be back at the same time on Tuesday. Thank you for watching.